coming out here. Our guest, Sliwa, is probably looking for parking. You know it's a challenge here in Boro Park. I want to thank you all for coming out. First, I actually want to introduce some folks who are dear friends who have to rush out. The first person I'd like to introduce today is a personal friend of mine. He's somebody who literally every single group in our community owes a hakarsa toifu. The chairman of the finance committee, he works with us very, very much to make sure that our community gets its fair share of funding. He's somebody who really cares about the community, is dedicated to the community, and literally every issue that we've ever had, child care funding on up, he's been there. Without further ado, I'd like to call the finance chairman, Councilman Dominic M. Recchia, Jr.
Good morning. Good morning. Pleasure to be here. And I want to thank David Greenfield for inviting me to say a few words this morning to his volunteer breakfast. But I want to thank all the volunteers for showing up this morning and supporting my friend and my colleague in the City Council, David Greenfield. Hello. There we go. David is an outstanding city councilman. He's an up-and-coming star in the Democratic Party, but more importantly in the city council. You don't know how lucky you are to have such a wonderful representative. Someone who catches on quickly, someone that understands the budget process. Let me tell you, many council members do not understand the budget process. But he understands what needs to be done and how to get it done. So this past budget was a very, very difficult budget. There were programs like Early Learn and daycare that Boro Park was facing devastating cuts. I don't know if people realize this, but many of your programs were slated to be closed. I met with several groups and we decided to figure out what they could do, what they can't do. But what the mayor did under the supervision of his deputy mayor, Lindy Gibbs, is that they decided that they're going to change daycare in New York City. So what they did was, they said, we're going to grab all the money out there, from Head Start, from the federal government, from UPK, and we are going to figure out how we could make this better. But their definition of better and our definition of better are two different things. Instead of going around to every daycare center and working with them, telling them how they can make their programs better, they decided to put out a new RFP and to take away programs that have been around for 30, 40 years. And it was devastating because Boro Park really, really was going to get cut drastically, but under the supervision of Speaker Christine Quinn, myself, and David Greenfield, we figured out a way to save the programs in Boro Park. Inside of this whole RFP, there is a claim in there that if your groups get universal pre-K, you can't get early learn funding. And I know there are groups in Boro Park that used to get UPK and you were not awarded a grant from the Department of Education because of Early Learn. All right? We are working to try to resolve that problem. It's a major problem throughout New York City. And I just have to say, it's not right, okay? Because one program has nothing to do with the other program. If you are a good provider, you should be able to work it out and run both programs. Decisions shouldn't be made if you're getting other grants and other funding. That's not how it works. In addition to that, we want to make changes that will help the community, not foster dissension in our community, not set one group against another group, not make one group feel like they're being left out because another group came in on their territory, so to say. It was never like that. Especially here in Boro Park, people all work together. And we have to continue working together to make our community a better place to live. So this morning, I just have to say, I'm the finance chairman. We have a good budget this past year. It's a fiscally responsible budget. It was balanced. We protected the most vulnerable. But yet, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I just have to say that in the weeks ahead, all right, just to give you all a heads up, is that the tax revenues have not been coming in where we expected them to come in. This whole thing with the taxi medallions, just so everybody knows, we were planning on this year's budget $650 million from the sale of taxi medallions. As you read in the papers, we lost the case. The city lost the case. The taxi medallions won. It's going up on appeal. If that case is not successful, all right, where are we going to get the $650 million? And that is something that we're working on right now. We do have in the trust fund, all right, $1 billion that from years ago, we had a surplus and we put money away. So we do have $1 billion that we can go there to make up. And we're trying to figure out what we should do to make up that $650 million shortfall from the sale of taxi medallions. But it's not to worry because we have different options. And I just have to say this, okay, as the finance chairman from New York City Council, we are not going to raise taxes. I don't know if there was a report out released yesterday that New York State is the most expensive state to raise a child. Okay? That is unacceptable. That we are the most expensive state. We have to get that down. I just have to say, I see my former colleague and good friend, Simca Felder. I was to work with in the City Council, and he's doing great in the Controller's office, but I wish him luck in his future endeavors. You have my support 200%. Whatever I can do to help my good friend become the next senator. My good friend, Steve Mostofsky here. He's up for re-election for judge. I wish him the best of luck. When I was first running in my district, I go from Coney Island all the way to Kings Highway and 19th Avenue and Coney Island Avenue. Steve Mostofsky was one of the first persons there who endorsed me and helped me get elected. And I just wish you the best of luck, because we need people like you on the bench. And I hope Thursday is a successful day as you become a new civil court judge in New York. If anybody wants to know anything about the finances in New York City, you can go to my website, directed.com. We have a section here that deals with finances. If you have any problems or any way we can help you, you can call my office or call David, and we'll help you, especially with property taxes. All right? This is a nightmare. What's going on with this commissioner in the property tax? I know there's a few people from this community we've been working with, and we've been successful in helping them out with their tax bills, but it is a problem. So what I'm telling everyone, you should definitely watch your property tax bills and the way they assess your properties. Because this commissioner, okay, is the #1 complaint in my office is with the Department of Finance. It's the way he's collecting, the way he did the sale of the tax liens. Believe it or not, there were like 3 or 4 synagogues that he sold the tax liens for. And we had to figure out a way to get those tax liens back. And it was just so that we were trying to resolve the issues, and it wasn't happening. But we wind up successful, and we were able to help those institutions. So, thank you very much. I have another stop, okay? I want to thank Councilman Greenfield. I want to thank you all. Thank you for volunteering, because as a volunteer, you are the ones that are out there in the trenches. You are the ones that are making our communities a better place to live in. Without your help, I can't do my job. And if you have any complaints or any way you think we can help you, please contact myself or David, and we'd love to work with you. Thank you.
I want to thank Ellie Costello, who is the executive director of the Boro Park Y, for the great work that she does here all year round, and for giving us this terrific location. Thank you very much. I was actually just on the phone with Curtis Sliwa's Curtis Sliwa's folks, he actually is in the hospital with his father, Maimonides, but he's still going to try to stop by here in just a few minutes. His father, unfortunately, was in a very serious condition, but he's going to try to come by here in just a few minutes. I just want to add one other thing, just to update you on something that I think is very important that people are wondering about in the community. As all of you know, a few weeks ago, the administration, the mayor's office, through the Department of Health, came out with a decision that they want to regulate Matitza B'Peh. Everybody here knows Matitza B'Peh is. Obviously, several years back, they actually were interested in looking at possibly stopping it. Now they want to regulate it. And so, you know, people have come to me, and people, I think, are very frustrated. I think the reason we're so frustrated is because when you look around the world at what's happening, especially what recently happened in a city in Germany, and I just think about how outrageous this is, right? I mean, this is the same Germany, right, that committed atrocities towards 6 million Yidden. And now, here we are, some 60 plus years later, and they're coming back, and they're banning Bris Milah. Now, I don't know about you, but this all sounds very familiar, right? Anytime a country doesn't like Yidden, and they have a problem with it, whether it be the Romans, or the Germans, or the Crusaders, or you go back through history, the first thing that they come for is always the most important thing to us, and that thing is Bris Milah. And so, you know, a lot of us have been working on this issue, and unfortunately we still don't have a resolution. I can tell you that as of Friday afternoon, and my staff will tell you this has been our #1 priority. We probably spent dozens of hours this going back and forth to City Hall. On Friday afternoon, I had a conversation with a senior deputy mayor on this issue. We made what we thought was a very fair offer, an offer that was backed by the Rabbanim and Gedolim, who are all very involved and very concerned about this. And unfortunately, as of Erev Shabbos, 2 minutes before Shabbos, they rejected our offer. And so here we are, it's Sunday, and this Thursday, unfortunately, it looks like the city's going to vote on this proposal. I think people ask me, you know, why is it so important? I think that there's a fundamental concept that we here in the United States, when we live in a free country, we are entitled, and I can tell you this as a lawyer, as somebody who practiced and studied, we are entitled to practice our religion freely. And I had this debate with somebody who was opposing this the other day. Someone called me. We had a debate about this issue. And I explained to this person, you know, what's next? On Friday night, are the police going to come knocking on our door to see if I gave some of the Kiddush wine to my son who's under the age of 21? Technically, that's illegal, right? Can you imagine the Arba places on Pesach? Ain't lo davar sod. And so I think it's important, it's very important that the entire community stays united on this issue. Because this is a critical issue for the Flint community. Because if you come after Matitza B'Peh, the next thing they can know is they can ban Matitza B'Peh, then they can actually regulate Bris Milah, and then you're not that far off from where we are in Germany, where unfortunately, in one city in Germany, they actually banned Bris Milah, and they filed criminal charges. Can you imagine in the year 2012, they filed criminal charges against the Milah. And so that's why for us, this is a very important issue, and that's why we're going to do everything we can. And I told this to the mayor, and I told this to the deputy mayor, I told this to the commissioner. This is a pivotal issue for us. And we're not just going to take this line down. If they're not willing to come up with an agreement, which we made many fair offers, to try to accommodate that the Rabbanim have supported, we're going to keep fighting this. And let me tell you folks, we have to be pragmatic. Mayor Bloomberg's here, but he's gone in 16 months. And if he won't reverse this, we are going to make this an issue in the mayoral campaign. And we are going to make sure that every single person who's running for mayor respects our community, because that's the right thing to do. You know, I just want to give a quick shout out to the groups that are here. Curtis is going to be in a very big rush. I was going to do this as part of the introduction, but I just really want to, everybody here deserves to be named by name, and we're going to name the organizations. Obviously, the oldest volunteer organization in our community, the one that we all rely on, everybody, whether you admit it or not, at one time in their life needed Hatzalah. The work that these volunteers do day and night. You know, I joked with people that technically I work 24/6. However, the reality is that on Shabbos I go into shul and people come to me and they have a problem, right? Unfortunately, I can't write it down, so I usually forget. I beg them, please call me on Monday. They never do, of course. I just come the next Shabbos and say, what? Take care of my problem. I said, I told you, please call on Monday. I can't write everything down. Obviously, it's Shabbos. Hatzol really is a 24/7 job. It really is. It's something where they sacrifice, leave their families, their wives, their kids. They run out of shul. Okay, some people enjoy running out of shul, but not every week, right? And so really, I have to give Hatzol an incredible amount of credit. I want to thank all their volunteers and thank them for coming out here today and for the work that they do for the community. Now, both sides. People ask, why are we so safe in Boro Park? I say, listen, the NYPD is doing a pretty good job, but Shiner is doing a great job. And that's why we're safe here in Boro Park, close to the Boro Park Council. And if you don't believe me, just ask the recent perpetrator who literally burglarized 30 homes who the Boro Park Shiner actually captured. And so we want to give them a big round of applause. Folks, I was actually just talking about the dozen groups that are here today, and we were just up to the Boro Park Shiner and the wonderful work that they do every single day. But I have to tell you that the original Shiner in New York City in May of 1977, that's 8 years before Shiner was founded, the original Shiner in this city was, I believe, actually known as the Magnificent 13. Before it became Curtis Sliwa's guardian angels. What's incredible about Curtis is that Curtis is somebody who was born in Brooklyn, and as you'll hear in a second, he still is from Brooklyn, and he's somebody who really cares about the community, and he wanted to make a difference not just in his community, but all across the city. And that's why the Guardian Angels have presence literally in the 5 boroughs of New York. But more than that, Rabbi Sai, Curtis is a survivor. I don't know if all of you know the story. On June 19th, 1992, Curtis was speaking out against the mob. The mob was very upset. It was the Gottis, very powerful crime family. In case you don't know how powerful they were, every time John Gotti got arrested, he would get off. 3 times in a row. Curtis Sliwa picks up a cab, jumps in the back of it and says, take me to my studio. He's got one of the top rated radio shows in New York City every morning, 9:70, 7 to 10 a.m. He's also a host on New York 1. On the way, he looks up, he sees a guy with the beret, the guy turns around, shoots him in the back of a cab. The cab is flying down. Curtis, this is a survivor. Curtis says, I'm not giving up. He breaks the window, jumps out of the window, and rolls away, and Curtis is standing here with us today. You know, folks, I will tell you, I really will tell you, and I'm just going to wrap it up with this because Curtis really has to go. I will tell you that when I think of New Yorkers, and I think of iconic New Yorkers, I think, when I think politics, I think of Mayor Rudy Giuliani. When I think of real estate, I think Donald Trump. When I think of sports, I think of Yogi Berra. When I think of activism, when I think of people who care about New York and are always willing to say the truth and the right thing, I think of Curtis Sliwa. So, it's really a pleasure for me. It's a pleasure for me to inaugurate this first annual volunteer breakfast by giving this award, presented to Curtis Sliwa in recognition of a lifetime of leadership and service to New York City. First annual Boro Park Volunteer Appreciation Breakfast, September 9th, 2012. And I just want to tell you something. If you see here, we're giving Curtis a shayfer. First of all, Curtis is an honorary Jew. He's somebody who cares about the community, he's somebody who fights for the community, and he's somebody who understands the cry to justice. Plus, I figured Curtis probably has hundreds of awards, probably never got a chauffeur. So maybe I actually will get some room in his office. It's really a privilege and a pleasure. Curtis has to go. Unfortunately, he's dealing with a very difficult situation. He just came from Maimonides Hospital, which he'll update us on. I want to tell you folks, really, there's not a lot of people in this city that I can say we can look up to and as a role model, and is really one of the premier volunteers in New York City. It's a privilege for us to have him here, and that person is Curtis Sliwa.
want to thank Councilman Greenfield for this effort to honor and acknowledge volunteers. There are a lot of elected officials from both parties, those who want to run for office, those who want to stay in office, who do it sometimes just because they have to do it. And you can see there's no genuine appreciation for what volunteers do on their part, except when it comes time to get out the vote and do the lip drops. Then they're very favorably in tune with their volunteers. But Councilman Greenfield has been involved in promoting volunteer service for quite some time. Now, I don't know that directly. I learned that from the mother of my two children, Carter, age 4, Hunter, age 1, former City Councilwoman Melinda Katz. She told me of his work. She told me of the good, the bad, the ugly. Those that are just posers and fronters who are elected officials, I'm not going to mention names to get her in trouble. Those who are half-steppers, you know, they only schlep when they have to, not when they don't. And then those that are true believers. And Melinda doesn't often bestow upon any of her colleagues or friends or those that she does business with the status of true believer, but to your councilman, she does. And you should be grateful that you have somebody who is so aligned with you. I also want to thank the community here in Boro Park, because it was about 3 years ago, my parents, Chester, merchant seaman, 46 years, my mother, Francesca, still living in the house that I was raised most of my years on 89th and J in Canarsie. My dad was having many, many physical problems. And I wanted him to be put into a hospital for care nearby. And I looked at the options and I said, Brookdale, where I oftentimes spent a lot of times growing up, no way. Kings County, save that for another day. Woodkill, that's right, I know it's not called Woodkill, but unfortunately at times that's what's happened to some of their patients. But Melinda Katz at that time said to me, you really need to talk to Douglas Javelin. And even though your parents are Gentiles, Maimonides takes care of everybody. They don't look at somebody's religion. They look at somebody's need. And I think based on the fact that your parents want to stay in Brooklyn, you have to understand my father. My father, into his 90s, would literally come outdoors every day in Canarsie, rain, snow, sleet, or shine. And at the start of the day, he would raise the American flag, and then he would literally eye-fornicate anyone outside who was giving him a bad look. And I would say, Dad, you want to start a fight with these homeboys early in the morning? I said, don't you think it's time that maybe you and Mom think of heading to Florida or Arizona? You know, I'm in a situation where I can help you if you would like to make that transition. And my dad, as he would always do, say, hey, I thought you were a tough guy. And he'd be pushing me in my chest, and he said, look, the Santini brothers are not going to move us only Guarino Funeral Home. It'll be feet first on a gurney. We believe, as he always taught me since I was a young whippersnapper, improve, don't move. And that obviously has been the calling card of your community. You don't get buffaloed out. You don't get bullied out. Nobody comes and treads on your neighborhood. Nobody intimidates any of you in your neighborhood. And it's not just because you depend on the police or government, because you take care of it on your own. Men in this community. So before coming over, I had to make a call at 10 o'clock this morning, a series of calls. I was just walking around the streets of Boro Park. And my final conversation was with Douglas Javelin. And I wanted to thank him and his staff members and all those, the professionals, the paid, the medical practitioners, the volunteers, the community folks that were doing outreach. As I said, you know, I was able to sit in intensive care with my father, and at 10:05, see him slip into the hereafter. I can't think of any better place for him to have passed on Because I think of the past 3 years and all the people who come up to me every time I would visit him. Every time I'd be there sitting, because there were some periods it was touch and go. And they would want to come up and they want to give me some support. And they'd want to say, you know, I know the work you've done, Curtis, but I also know that you and you alone didn't come up with this philosophy, didn't come up with this idea about volunteer service as a guardian angel. There had to be a source. And clearly the source of that encouragement for me, as we all need mentors, as we all need promoters, as we all need people to get us over that edge, when darkness and doom and gloom and negativity and selfishness seem to be the rule of the day, that person was Chester Sliwa, who earlier this morning passed away at Maimonides Hospital. But boy, you know, I owe everything to Maimonides Hospital, and I owe everything to thousands of people that I've met here in Borough Park as I've come in and out off the D train or by taking a van to visit with him, to meet and greet people. You could feel the positive energy. My father, by all medical accounts, should not have had an extra 3 years for him to be able to enjoy life. The folks at Maimonides enabled him to be able to enjoy my sons, Hunter and Carter and Anthony, to enjoy his grandchildren from my sister Alita, to enjoy those things he could never have enjoyed if, in fact, God had taken him at an earlier day. So, you know, let's give a great round of applause for that great medical institution right in the heart of the neighborhood. And then to volunteer service. Look, I've certainly seen it in the faces of the Shalom members, whether it was here in Borough Park, whether it was in Flatbush, Crown Heights, in Williamsburg. And I've certainly been in solidarity with them because when I was born and raised in Canarsie, my father, Chester, and my mother didn't send me to school in Canarsie, they sent me to school in Crown Heights. Being a Gentile, I went to St. Matthew's, which was on Eastern Parkway at Utica Avenue in Lincoln Place. And then later on, years later, I went to Brooklyn Prep, which was a Jesuit high school, right off of Nostrand, President, and Sterling. And I would generally walk where the B-17 bus would lead me off coming in from Canarsie, from Utica Avenue all the way to Nostrand Avenue. And naturally, I would inevitably end up going through the community of what we refer to the Gentiles as the black hats and the long black coats, the Hasidim. And I can remember at a very early age, it may have been my sophomore, junior year in high school, when I saw this rabbi, this big macha, this big muckety-muck that so many were surrounding. I had no idea who he was. I couldn't even pronounce the names of the rabbis and the muckety-mucks and the machas. But he was a rabbi from Sao Paulo, and many people were saying he's starting a patrol, the Maccabee Patrol. And at that time, if you remember, there were forces of evil that surrounded that neighborhood who didn't want the Hasidim to live there, who were doing everything within their power to bully them out, to abuse them, to rob them, to sexually abuse them, simply because they were different than others. And there were bullies that came in the form of blackface, there were bullies that came in the form of whiteface, the bullies who just were ignorant and intolerant. And I'll never forget, from a community that I thought was feckless and weak and would fold like a cheap camera, anytime they were intimidated. On occasion, I would see men running out into the streets in all different directions as if they were the Keystone Cops. I thought it was a calamity situation. And yet they were responding to the call to the streets. They were dropping whatever they were doing, be they a baker or butcher, whether they were driving a livery car, whatever they were doing. And someone had yelled, "Hopsum." Somebody had uttered that call. And all I could see at that point, the first time I saw it on Kingston Avenue, running down Empire Boulevard, were 4 whippersnappers who were running for their lives and hundreds of black hats who were chasing them. And I was putting a bet on the over-under and the point spread that those 4 huckleberries would have boots in their backside, and I would cheer it on. Wasn't called Shalom at the time, and there were other elements that were organizing right here right here in Boro Park, in Flatbush, out in Rego Park, Forest Hills, and in other parts, for the very same reason. They were an inspiration. My father, who just passed this morning, I'll never forget a time in which Maimonides had dispatched an emergency ambulance for him for one of the times he was on the edge. And they didn't have one of the FDNY units available, or they didn't have any of the units of Maimonides available. So they had sent a volunteer ambulance corps from Hatsola. My mother was looking out the window, and as she saw the men with the yarmulkes coming down with the gurney, and she called me up. She said, she was frantic. "Curtis, what do I do? We have pictures of Jesus Christ all over here. They're going to be offended. Why are they coming here to take Daddy away?" I said, "Those are the volunteer members of Hatsola. Assure my father that he'll be safe and secure." Well, naturally, you know what happens when there's a three-party conversation. Hatsola got mispronounced by my mother. The next thing, my dad, who was like in a drug-induced psychosis because he was highly sedated, broke out screaming and hollering that Hezbollah is not going to take him to any hospital in the area and that they're going to have to go out fighting. And I had to reassure my dad it wasn't Hezbollah, it was Hatsola. And in the many trips that I've taken throughout the city of New York, I've seen volunteers from various Jewish agencies tending to the new refugees who have come here, who have tried to reconnect with their Jewish roots, and more importantly, understand what it is to be an American and take full advantage of that opportunity. Nameless, faceless, hundreds and hundreds of volunteers, Jewish, Gentile, all working for the same cause, to give support where there was no support. And now that we're in fiscal distress, whether it's social services, whether it's giving out clothes, whether it's giving out food, whether it's being there for the needy, whether it's just being there to console somebody in their time of need, who can argue that America is at a point now where we need volunteers more than ever before? Because I don't know about you, after watching the Republicans and the Democrats spew all the things that they were going to do at their convention, did you hear any mention of volunteerism at all? No. Not one mention. And it is one of the solutions. Look, there's not enough money to go around. Whether you slice the cheese the way the Democrats want or slice the cheese the way the Republicans want, there is just not enough money to go down. Everyone recognizes we've spent too much and we've got to cut back in order to pay those that we owe. And you know, the void is going to have to be filled by those who are already out there busting their shoes, who are serving the community on a regular basis. And they need some kind of assistance. But more than assistance, no volunteer ever asks for pay or compensation or a stipend. The only thing that volunteers need to get nourished to continue on is recognition and acknowledgement, like as what is taking place today at this breakfast. A pat on the back so hard you have to go for a chiropractic adjustment the next day. Recognition from the community of which organization you represent and what you are doing in your own private time to make for a better community. The misunderstanding that I've had to go out there and tell the story over time and time again is that every one of your Jewish volunteer agencies and activities is not just there to serve the Jewish community. I've seen it with my own eyes time and time again. People you are unaffiliated with, people you don't know, people who are of a different religion, people who in fact privately would acknowledge they hate you right down to the marrow of your bone, would be the ones that you would serve over and over and over again and not ask for anything in return. Is there any form of higher service to God, to community, and country? And so I finish on this note, because maybe God had determined that when my mentor, my role model, That man in my life who introduced me to the concept of volunteer service and promoted it in me, didn't discourage it in me, like my friends and colleagues who were growing up, whose parents were too worried. You might get a cold. What happens if you break your leg? Nobody's going to care. You got to think about your own self. I am me. And my dad would consistently inoculate me. You're not here for yourself. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It's us and we. What will you have said on your last day on this earth to suggest that you have given more than you have taken? I know today on my dad's last day, there is no doubt in my mind when you look at the book is weighted in terms of giving as opposed to taking. And that's what volunteers do, because it's not just the service that you do, it's what you inspire others to do. I stand before you in charge of now Guardian Angels in 14 countries, 130 cities, 5,000 members all over the world. They're in Japan, the Philippines, New Zealand. They're in Brazil, Peru, Mexico. They're in Italy. They're in Israel. They're in England. They're in Canada, the Dominican Republic. They're in Trinidad and Tobago. They're throughout the United States. But there wouldn't have been one guardian angel existing from February 13th of 1979 when I led that first patrol from Mickey D's, McDonald's in the Bronx, if it had not been for Chester Sliwa. Day in, day out, promoting me, encouraging me, and telling me no matter what I do, he'll be there covering my back. And every time I got arrested 76 times by a city that didn't understand what I was doing, who do you think was there at the precinct? Who do you think was there at the arraignment? My father, Chester Sliwa, encouraging me to continue. So, councilmen, other great members of this community, there are going to be those occasions when people just don't understand why you do what you do and what you receive in return. And I've always said, the thing you get, your paycheck is not this. You get joy for what you do. A lot of people out there just don't understand that. So how are we going to change that mindset? In a new generation that just buries itself in technology. Gee, I got a text, I got a Facebook, I got a sex, I got a tweet, I got to do this, I got to do that. That's the only way they know how to communicate, and that's all they seem to care about now. Do we blame them? Do we blame the technology? Or do we blame ourselves because we haven't raised them the way we were raised? I don't believe any one of you here today, men or women, Jews or Gentiles, are the way you are simply because you were born and some lightning bolt struck you when you took a different path in your family or your family's family. I know that the seed was implanted early and was fertilized over and over, like my father and mother fertilized that seed to encourage, to promote, to try to get us to be the best that we can be for others, not just for ourselves. So carry on in the great work you do, and yes, I dare say in God's work. In some places you're not permitted to say that. And I know on my last day, the one thing that I want my sons to be proud of is not that people recognize me or know who I am, but to know that their father did for them what my father did for me, what his father did for him originally, in the areas of Poland where you would never have thought in your life that kind of ideology would have existed. So continue on. And when those thugs, those miscreants, those cretins with chromosome damage, when those criminals come into your neighborhood or stalk others outside of your neighborhood, whether they're white collar or blue collar or no collar, when it comes time and you're the only ones between them and creating mayhem, while you're calling 911, while you're doing everything else that are part of the rules and regulations, follow the man's guide to dealing with these miscreants. When you hear Hobson, make them run for their lives. God bless all of you. Thanks for having me here this morning.
with two things. The first thing I want to say is that, as Curtis probably knows, we are on the eve of the high holidays. Next week, Sunday night, is the holiday of Rosh Hashanah. I have to tell you that I've been a religious Jew my whole life. I cannot think of a more inspiring speech on the eve of the high holidays to have us understand what's important and what's not than this speech that we just had from Curtis Sliwa. Thank you very much. The other thing I just want to say is, and I think Curtis said it more eloquently than anyone could, we all are a product of our families. I'd like for everyone to stand up and give a standing ovation for the life, for the memory of Chester and Sliwa. We appreciate what you've done. We appreciate what your family's done. We appreciate what you're doing with the next generation. We thank you. God bless you. And you really will be, your father's memory will be in our memory for years to come. Thank you very much. I just want to conclude. I just want, please have a seat. Have a seat. We're just wrapping up. I just want to conclude by recognizing quickly. I want to conclude by recognizing quickly the other groups. Steve, don't make me call you out. Steve, talk to you. I want to conclude, folks, Connor, Councilman, thank you. I just want to conclude by recognizing the other groups and volunteers that do incredible work. I want to recognize the leadership of Flapper Shimer. I want to thank them for all the hard work that they do around. I want to just thank the folks at Chaverim. Let me tell you something. When people call my office and we don't know what to do, we have a problem, we call Chaverim. I want to thank them for their leadership. I want to thank the folks at Yad Ephraim. I got to tell you, recently I was in the hospital with a relative, and I couldn't understand when I heard Yad Ephraim makes food for the family members. I said, why do the family members need food? I sat in the hospital with a relative for 48 hours straight. If not for Yad Ephraim, I would have starved. I want to thank you so much for your work. I want to thank the remarkable work that Chesed does, transporting people, helping them, making sure that there's somebody to assist someone when you have a family member in the hospital. Of course, I want to thank the work of Chesed. Give them a big round of applause. I mean, obviously, we can't overstate the work that Chesed Shalem does. It really is a true Chesed, and we thank them. And obviously, none of us wants their services, but we all appreciate the work that they're doing. I'll tell you, Rabbi Isai, we have an organization that's relatively new in our community, but they mamish deal in Hatzalas and Nefashos, and that is DRAR. They provide legal services to people who need it the most, and I want to thank them. And I also want to thank our friends at Tanchei Shabbos, because they are the originators of helping people in our community. And I'll just say one final thing. The reason I did this breakfast, this is a breakfast that we've been planning for a while, is because the reality is that in the work that we do, when you work for the Klal, you run around and you work hard and you care about the community and you deserve hakaras hatayah. And that's in fact why we did a small breakfast. We looked at the list. We actually could have had 1,000 people today. We looked at the list and we asked each group to bring 10 people, the 10 hardest working people, because we want to recognize the work that you do. And I have to tell you, as somebody who's an elected official, the proudest part of being an elected official for this community, the proudest part of being, that I actually miss McKinney, is that possible? I got to tell you folks, recently I went to visit a fellow who unfortunately, he's really in the last stages of Alzheimer's. I went into his house to visit him, and I sat down, and he was watching Abram Fried. And he had a stack this high of 20 Abram Fried DVDs. And I asked his wife, I said, I don't understand. And she said, let me tell you something. The only thing that keeps my husband calm is watching Abram Fried, and the only reason he's calm is because of McKinney. And I want to just end on this final note. You know, we have a lot of fights in this community. You have to go out there and you have to explain to people. People criticize you. What's Mitzvah's Bepeh? Why does Shulman deserve to get money? Why does Hatzalah get special privileges? And what I tell people time and time again is, I am privileged to represent this community because no community in this city, No community in this country does the chesed that this community does, and that chesed is thanks to all of you. So I wish all of you and may we share in many simchas in the future. Thank you very much.